Can you use a 7-year-old MacBook Pro as your main machine in 2022? Well, the answer just might shock you. While not only being a solid option for those on a budget, or for those wanting to try a Mac for the first time, the 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro is a computer that packs in a lot of punch for its age. For example, I've used it to edit and upload all of these videos. And the best part, I only paid $700 for it. But this doesn't mean it's all sunshine and rainbows from here on out. Of course, due to its age, there are still a fair number of compromises you might need to make compared to the newest models depending on your needs, like mediocre battery life and less software support in the future. And so before my brand spanking new 14-inch MacBook Pro arrives, which I'm upgrading to, in this video I'm going to be giving my thoughts on one of the oldest supported Apple laptops, the 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro, from a 2022 perspective, along with helping you decide whether it's the right machine for you. And by the way, if you'd like to skip ahead to see something specific, the timestamps are in the description below. So starting off with the design, the 2015 MacBook Pro sports the classic and timeless silver aluminium body with the ports and light up Apple logo, and the overall styling has definitely held up very well, considering that this specific look was actually first used in 2012, so it's a 10-year-old design as of now, and it still looks and feels very well put together. Now this MacBook Pro was actually the last one to sport a wide variety of ports before they were removed on the 2016 redesign, being replaced with just a few USB-C outlets, and unheard of until last year when they were reintroduced on the 14 and 16-inch models. The right hand side on here sports a regular USB port, HDMI, and SD card slot, and on the left hand side you've got a headphone jack, another USB port, two Thunderbolt 2 ports, and a MagSafe charging connector, which is far superior to USB-C charging since it uses magnets to attach itself, therefore it'll come out safely if you happen to trip over your cord, plus it's just super easy and satisfying to plug in. And I'm so glad that this feature has also been brought back on the newest models. But compared to other new Macs and Windows laptops, it is significantly heavier and thicker with a weight of 1.58 kilos and a thickness of 0.71 inches. Of course, it's not the end of the world, but it is worth noting if you plan to carry this machine around a lot, although the heft does make it feel rock solid, and again, it definitely isn't lacking when it comes to build quality. I mean, this was a $2,000 computer. Now the display is pretty much the area that shows its age the least on here, and it outdoes the ones on most Windows laptops today by a long shot, thanks to its resolution of 2560 by 1600 and pixel density of 227 pixels per inch. All of your content will look amazing. For 99% of people, especially at this price point, it does the job more than solidly, whether you're watching a movie, typing up a document, or working on a spreadsheet in Excel. Its age is only quote-unquote revealed when you dig deeper and find that it lacks quite a few small and non-essential features like true tone and better color reproduction, as well as a high refresh rate. It also doesn't get very bright in outdoor environments, capping at a lousy 300 nits, so if you're in the blaring sun, then you'll probably have a hard time seeing what you're doing. And in addition to that, the chunky-ish bezels around the screen are starting to feel dated by today's standards, but I mean, they're not a disaster, and most people won't care about them, and you've still got a decently sized, razor-sharp, and immersive panel. Putting aside those minor drawbacks, this is a solid 8 out of 10 display that is still pretty top-notch in 2022. Now at the top of the display, there's a 720p webcam along with dual mics that are situated on the left-hand side at the bottom, and rather than me telling you how mediocre they are, I think it's better that you see and hear for yourself. So this is a raw sample of the mic and webcam of the 2015 MacBook Pro, and as you can probably see and hear, well, both aren't great. You know, they've fallen behind significantly compared to modern standards, and as for the webcam, you know, colors are pretty washed out, blurry, grainy, overexposed, and then the mic just sounds tinny, low quality, doesn't have much depth to it. But just for like a FaceTime or Zoom call, you know, both will work fine. You know, you can still hear me, they're just not great quality. And while we're at it, let's hear a quick sample from the speakers on here. The laptop on the right is the 13-inch 2019 MacBook Pro for comparison. So clearly, the older speakers don't even come close. Let's face it, they sound quite shallow and tinny, but like the webcam and mics, it's one of those minor drawbacks that aren't that hard to live with. Moving on to the keyboard, the one on the 2015 MacBook Pro is pretty good. It's got plenty of travel and feels comfortable enough to type on, although for some people's liking, it may be a tad too noisy. Although it's got a very satisfying note to it. Take a listen. The only downside to this keyboard in my opinion is that I feel like I have to push down a bit harder than normal to register presses, which can make touch typing not as easy as it could be at first, but it's something that I've gotten used to. And for the main part, it's comfortable enough, but not the most amazing laptop keyboard I've ever used. Now this was actually the last time that this specific keyboard was seen on the MacBook Pro before the horrendous butterfly keyboard took its place on the 2016 lineup, which was a terrible move on Apple's part, because with the butterfly keyboard, you're getting a plethora of issues, plus it's just a much less comfortable experience due to the shallow travel. Now of course, there's no touch bar or touch ID sensor on here, since these features also weren't introduced until the following year, so you've got a nice full row of function keys, plus the power button is actually part of the keyboard, which is an interesting quirk that you don't actually see anymore on Macs. And while the touch bar admittedly does have its uses, rest assured you can enjoy the tactile feeling of turning up the volume and brightness, just like on the new models, which have actually killed off the touch bar due to its negative feedback. Now when it comes to the trackpad, I can't get enough of the one on here. This was the first MacBook Pro to sport the haptic trackpad, which is still in use by every MacBook today. Basically, instead of a physical button mechanism, this kind of trackpad gives off a vibration that simulates and feels just like a click when you apply pressure to it, therefore creating the sensation that you're pressing a physical button, but you're actually not. So this means you can press all the way up to the top without it getting stiff, plus you can take advantage of the pressure sensitivity to do cool things like hard press on a word to see its meaning. MacBook trackpads are the best on the market, and even this one from 2015 is still superior in my book to every other modern Windows laptop. The only thing that could be seen as a drawback here is that it's quite small compared to the ginormous modern trackpads, which means that things like dragging items feels a bit more limited than usual, but nevertheless, it's still phenomenal to use. Now let's get to the thing that you probably care about the most, the performance. And don't worry, I'll do a Geekbench comparison to the newest models in just a minute. But while these machines are by no means powerhouses anymore, performance is going to vary depending on what configuration your machine has. My machine's specs consist of the 2.7 GHz Intel Core i5 5th gen processor, 8 GB of RAM, and a 256 GB SSD. On Geekbench 5, this specific configuration has a score of 759 for single core and 1618 for multi-core. Now these were the base model specs, apart from the 256 GB of storage, and so it's no longer the snappy, speedy beast it once was, but considering I actually edit all of these videos on here in 4K, the specs have held up surprisingly well for what they can do. And aside from video editing, I also use this machine for school, which entails light tasks like web browsing, typing documents, and Excel spreadsheets, which are an absolute breeze with little to no lag and plenty of responsiveness. So for the average person who's only going to be doing things of that nature, it works like a dream. But the same cannot be said for anything intensive. Admittedly, video editing on here isn't exactly buttery, and scrolling through the timeline and dragging clips around can't be done without a few hiccups, which can get very frustrating at times, especially when it throttles to the point of being pretty much unusable, which isn't a rare occurrence. In fact, while I'm recording this voiceover on my machine right now, the fan is spinning like crazy, but hopefully you can't hear it due to the background music. But nevertheless, every video I've posted on YouTube was edited using this machine, so it is most definitely doable, but just not ideal. Now just for some perspective, comparing Geekbench 5 scores of the 2015 MacBook Pros and the most recent ones, it's once again quite clear that the 2015 models are far from what they used to be, and are only a fraction of what the new models are in terms of multi-core. But despite this, the single core scores are actually much closer to what the new machines have, around half, hence this machine being able to run light tasks extremely smoothly, but anything beyond that is going to be a strain, and will unfortunately result in thermal throttling. If you do want the most performance though, the 15-inch model is the one to go with. It is going to cost a bit more than the 13-inch ones, but its multi-core score is around double in comparison, due to it having 4 CPU cores instead of 2, like on the 13-inch variations. But let's face it, none of these have pro-level performance anymore, so if you're looking for plenty of power on a budget, this ain't it. But through day-to-day light use, it's honestly pretty impressive for how smoothly it can get through non-intensive stuff. And all in all, the performance holds up amazingly for a 7-year-old computer. And if I wasn't doing video editing, then I would probably ride this machine out until it lost software support. But despite this, the speeds on my soon-to-arrive 14-inch MacBook Pro will be a much-needed upgrade. In terms of software, the 2015 MacBook Pro can run up to the latest macOS Monterey, but sadly, it probably only has 1 or 2 years left of this, although it's had a pretty good run. I mean, it's been supported leaps and bounds longer than pretty much any Windows laptop from the same era, and for now, it's got pretty much all the same features as the new MacBooks like widgets and Control Center, and even after the support is dropped, you can still continue to use it. It's just that it'll stop receiving new features that come with the updates, and slowly become more obsolete with programs and apps as time goes on. But for the next year or two, it should be kept up to date, maybe even longer, but we'll have to wait and see. No one's certain on how long it'll last. But one thing I'm definitely certain on is how mediocre the battery life is. It's got an 8320 mAh cell, and depending on how much it's been used over the years, it's going to vary, but because of the more intensive modern software, chances are it's not going to be great anyway. If you can find one with a battery in good condition, it should probably still give you maybe 6 to 8 hours of use between charges, which is unlikely to cut it for most people, especially heavy users. And in my case, it drains incredibly fast when doing power-intensive tasks like editing videos or playing Roblox, but when just typing documents or watching movies, it gets me by just fine, easily a full day's use, although by no means is this good battery life. And so either keep that in mind or make sure that you're always near a charger. And so, with my review now out of the way, let's discuss whether this is the right machine for you. Well, the $700 to $1,000 on used sites like eBay or Gumtree is a pretty fair deal, and it's great value for what you're getting. And if you fall into the category of wanting to try a Mac, or just needing something for schoolwork, or light tasks, or the basics, then I'd definitely say give it a go. It's got a great display, a huge selection of ports, and more than decent performance for non-intensive activity. Although probably avoid the 128GB version, because it's not really enough storage for a laptop in 2022. And again, your main two drawbacks are the mediocre battery life, and the fact that software support will be very likely dropped within the next few years. But all in all, it's quite clear that while this isn't anything like a powerhouse or pro machine anymore, it's held up more than well for its age, and it can still handle the basics without any stuttering or hiccups. But if you plan to do things that suck up a lot of power, then it's definitely going to have a hard time keeping up. But again, I edit all of my videos on this machine in 4K, and while it's definitely far from a pleasant experience, it's more than possible, and it absolutely powers through light tasks without any hiccups or road bumps. And as I said earlier, I am upgrading to the 14-inch MacBook Pro very soon. It should arrive within the next couple of weeks, and it's going to be a huge jump in terms of basically everything: performance, display, battery life. But with that being said, the 2015 13-inch Pro has served me so well, and I will by all means definitely miss it. And so that pretty much sums up my review of the 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro from a 2022 perspective. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you drop me a like and subscribe to TechSpree for more reviews, insights, and the occasional unboxing. Thank you so much for watching. This is Tom with TechSpree, and I'll see you as always next time.